Hello, the time now is 4 o'clock on the hour, and we will get started with today's session. My name is Asia Simpson. I'm your Wellness and Benefits Consultant for Pomona Unified School District, and today's session will be on the basics of intermittent fasting. If you are live dialing in today, wonderful, thank you for joining. If you are reviewing this session in the recorded playback, thank you for reviewing this session. Today's session, as I mentioned, will be recorded. It will go from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. And it will provide a host of information for you, really keeping with the theme this year of wellness and weight loss, weight management, things that are in that realm. So we'll go ahead and get today's information going and flowing. And I'm going to share my screen here and get us started. So what are we going to cover today? What will be covered today and today's meeting objectives is I'll start with the basics of covering what is intermittent fasting exactly and how does it work. We'll talk about whether or not it's safe, who it may not be a great option for, and the things that you can eat while you're intermittent fasting. We'll also discuss some of the pros and the cons of intermittent fasting. And if you're really interested in trying out intermittent fasting, we'll take a look at some various options for intermittent fasting plans. And if you've already tried it and you're just not been successful in the past, you haven't lost any weight, if that was what your goal was, we'll talk about some of the reasons that might be bottlenecking your weight loss. We'll review some of the resources you can use, answer any questions, and do a raffle at the end. All right, let's go ahead and get us started. So what is intermittent fasting? Well, intermittent fasting is an eating plan where you alternate between periods of eating and not eating for a set amount of time. What it is not is just randomly deciding not to eat. That is not considered intermittent fasting. Even though that may be many of our habits, or sometimes that happens if we have a busy day, intermittent fasting is really a very set time frame in which you are eating or not eating. And it is really a plan and it's intentional. Now, how much time you spend not eating and what your eating window is, which is what you'll hear me refer to the time frame for which you eat as your eating window. The amount of time for each of those phases really is going to vary from a variety of different factors and from person to person. And we'll look at a few of what those factors might be. So how does it work? Well, intermittent fasting works by prolonging the period when your body has burned through calories consumed during your last meal, and then it begins to burn the fat. That's what we all want, right? We want to burn off the fat. Or for some of us, it may not be a matter of burning fat or losing weight. It may just be a matter of trying to take some time to give your digestive system a break. And it can often help with addressing craving issues and a whole host of other things. So you essentially set your fast period for a certain period of time, and you eat during a set period of time, as I mentioned before. There are very many different intermittent fasting schedules. As time has gone on, so many have changed. But the wonderful thing about intermittent fasting is that there is a lot of flexibility, especially if you're just starting out. We'll look at that here in a little bit. The type of intermittent fasting plan you choose, as well as what and how much you eat, will actually determine your weight loss and the rate at which you lose it. So we'll talk a bit more about that here in the upcoming slides. So I want to mention something. So the question becomes, is intermittent fasting safe? And the first thing I'll say is that it is always, always, always important for you to check with your physician to determine if intermittent fasting is safe for you based off of your health scenario and kind of what type of medication you're on, a variety of different factors that you really want to discuss with your primary care physician. And intermittent fasting, admittedly, is not for everyone. So let's take a look at a few groups of individuals who it may not necessarily be the best option for. So the first one is women who are trying to get pregnant or are already pregnant. Now, for those who are trying to get pregnant, that it could affect them. Sometimes if weight is the issue, is why the particular woman is not getting pregnant. Intermittent fasting might potentially help, and just depending on the advice of your doctor, you may or may not want to engage in intermittent fasting. But again, check with your primary care doctor. Also, generally, people with diabetes, it's particularly type 1, where you really do have to eat during a certain period of time. However, if you set up your intermittent fasting schedule during a time that would be traditional eating hours for most people, which are during the day, it could work out for you. It really depends. Children who are still growing in development should not do intermittent fasting. It could interfere with their developmental process. People with eating disorders should not attempt fasting, nor should those who are underweight. Anyone with other medical conditions, particularly gout or liver, kidney, or heart disease, you should really talk to your doctor before you decide to engage in intermittent fasting. And then if you're on medication that requires food for absorption, some meds do require that you take it with food in order for it to work. So you definitely would not want to be fasting while you were taking that type of medication, because then otherwise the medication may not work properly the way that it should. But overall, if you don't fall into any of those groups, then intermittent fasting can be safe and can help improve your overall health, just in general. So what is it that you can eat while you're intermittent fasting? Well, you're fasting, so you can't really eat. But during your fast, what you can drink are water, obviously, 0-calorie beverages, such as sparkling water, black coffee, and tea. Those are good things. And I guess technically you could drink 0-calorie sodas or whatnot, but I would highly suggest not really doing that, because sometimes things that are sweet can trigger a hunger craving. And so you're already in a situation with intermittent fasting where you're going to be hungry. You don't really want anything to agitate that even more. Sparkling water tends to help give you a full feeling, and black coffee and tea can be a way to help stay your appetite altogether. They have been known to really kill appetite and hunger pangs. During your eating periods, when it is time for you to eat, when you break fast and you can finally get some food, you can eat normally with intermittent fasting, but that doesn't mean you want to go crazy. However, intermittent fasting does allow for a range of different foods to be eaten and enjoyed and still help you achieve weight loss goals. Again, this varies for every single person. And it also varies based off of what you are eating during your eating period. In fact, many people say, and many experts say, that the most important part of intermittent fasting is not necessarily the fasting, but it is the period for which you eat and the quality of the food for which you eat when you actually start into your eating window. Some experts suggest Mediterranean style eating, which includes a lot of whole foods, leafy greens, healthy fats, nuts over chips, that type of thing. And then other experts recommend a low carb diet. And it really is going to depend upon you. So you'll have to kind of play around with it, and we'll look at some ideas around what you might consider with doing intermittent fasting. So let's look at some of the pros of intermittent fasting. Well, first of all, it's easy to do. There's not a lot of complication to it. It's either you're eating or you're not eating. So that's pretty much the gist of it. And you can actually make it fit into your lifestyle or add it as an additional component of your weight loss regimen or program. So say you're already on a weight loss program or regimen, you can weave it into your plan very easily. Okay. And depending on the intermittent fasting plan that you choose, there's no counting calories or carbs or points or anything like that, like you would do with some of the other programs. Now, if you're adding it into what you're already doing, then of course you would still want to maintain whatever the guidelines of your weight loss program are. But the intermittent fasting piece of it would not require you to do any of the counting of carbs, points, or calories. Okay. Plus, the bigger piece of this is that intermittent fasting can be very good for you. And there's been a lot of scientific research on animals in fasting, as well as some people in fastings and studies for that were done on people who did extended periods of time in fasting, and what the impact of their overall health was. And some of the benefits include the most obvious is weight loss. But they also found that lower cholesterol, lower blood pressure, improved blood sugar was found, as well as less internal inflammation. And a lot of times you can tell that you have a lot of inflammation if you are very mucousy, you have a lot of heartburn. Those are telltale signs of inflammation. But my experience has been the second to the last one is better brain health. I find that when I'm in a fasted state, as crazy as it might seem, my mental clarity is a lot higher. It is very, very, very distinct, and I tend to get a lot done. And that may be due to the fact that a lot of the energy that typically goes into digesting food, it can be used for brain utilization. I'm not as exhausted from doing or having my body digest things. So better brain health is one. And then studies also show that there are fewer age-related diseases. So I want to make a special note here, if you see in the bottom right corner, is that the benefits and issues experienced from those who intermittent fast, that varies from person to person. So one person may say they don't experience better brain health, but they have experienced a lot more weight loss or the combination of the two. I'll always say, as I mentioned in the last couple slides, it is very important that you consult with your physician before beginning a fasting plan, okay? Some of the cons. So there's bound to be some things that just are a bit of a struggle, and you can decide whether or not it is a deal breaker for you specifically. So the first one is it lacks in-depth nutritional guidance. So a lot of times people find that with intermittent fasting, they don't really have a lot of specific guidance around what they should specifically eat. And the intermittent fasting itself, it doesn't really provide a nutritional guideline. That really is based off of your diet alone. So you would want to make sure that you establish, when you're doing your intermittent fasting, an idea of what type of diet you're looking to maintain. And the rule of thumb is really to try to maintain or acquire a diet that is something that you can sustain over a long period of time, as opposed to a fad diet. Now, there are circumstances where people have to be under a restrictive diet for a certain period of time, but it is not going to be necessarily representative of the diet that they have, over the long haul. So there may be that. But for the general population who is looking to do intermittent fasting, choose a way of eating that's something that can be healthy and sustainable. Okay. And your eating out could be limited based off of how you set up your intermittent fasting schedule. So that could be a challenge. And it's inevitable. You're going to likely get hungry when you're doing intermittent fasting. And so what you'll have to just kind of be able to push through is the hunger piece of things. But things like sparkling water, black coffee, a lot of times people like green tea, those things can sometimes help alleviate some of the hunger pains. And oftentimes, if you notice, the hunger pains typically last somewhere around 10 minutes. And then they kind of subside before, you have your next wave. But they're not typically just you're hungry for the full 8 hours. The perception is that you're hungry for the whole time, but the actual hunger pains generally only last about 10 minutes. And then they go away, and they will come back, during a period that you're not eating. But just to give you a bit of things to think about around being hungry and hunger pains. Sometimes when people do not eat, they experience headaches, nausea, and maybe some other comfortable symptoms. And it really, those uncomfortable symptoms really vary from person to person. So again, this is not a one fits all, the pros and cons are showing in every single person the exact same way, because quite frankly, everyone's health situation is different. So how they respond to periods of not eating are going to vary. And I mentioned before, there are some people for which intermittent fasting is just not safe for, right? And if you do not choose a sustainable, healthy, balanced diet for which when you come off of your fast, you are in your eating window. If it's not a healthy and sustainable, balanced diet, then you could fall short nutritionally. So those are some things to think about. And in spite of all of these cons, it really does boil down to the type of balanced eating diet that you have when you are eating. And I want everyone to remember that that's going to be the most important part. All right, so let's take a look at some intermittent fasting plans. Let's just say you are ready to get down to it and, really start trying out intermittent fasting to see if it's for you. Now, I want to say I'm only showing 3 intermittent fasting plans. This is nowhere in any means a full exhaustive list of all of the intermittent fasting plans that are available out there. They vary in time. They vary in the way that you do them. So I just want to throw out there three of them to not confuse people. And you can tweak the time. So we'll start with the first one, which tends to be the easiest one for people to take on, and that is the 16-8 method. And this basically involves an 8-hour eating window and a 16-hour fasting window. So the fun thing that I want you to know about this particular method is that a big chunk of your fasting window can be while you're asleep. So if you schedule your eating window and your fasting time properly, you could have a eating window that begins at 8 and ends at 5, and then you're winding down for the evening, and then the rest of the evening into your sleeping period, you are fasting, and then when you wake up in the morning, have a light walk, and then make yourself some breakfast. So if you create an eating window like this, then it could work for you in a way that isn't really disruptive. And if 16 and 8 is too big of a window, many people also do shorter fasting periods where they've dropped or increased that eating window by 4. So instead of 8 hours, it's 12 hours, right? And instead of 16, it's 12. So they've done 12 and 12. So you can tweak this and see what your sweet spot is. There are a lot of apps that are out there that allow you to track your food. But what I've noticed is frequently a lot of them have the option to add, are you intermittent fasting? And you can set a reminder to yourself to start fasting at a certain period of time daily, or you can do it specific for certain days. So that's the 16 and 8 method. And if you see down in the bottom right corner, it kind of shows a little image of 8 hours to feed, 6 hours, 16 hours to fast. Okay. The next option that you have is eat, stop, eat. And this involves fasting for 24 hours once or twice per week. And because this is a more advanced version of fasting, you should really probably try your hand at the 16 and 8 method, or even the next one, which is the 5 and 2 diet. And with the 5 and 2 diet, you consume about 5 or 600 calories on 2 non-consecutive days of the week, but then you eat regular for the rest of the week. And for some people, that is actually more feasible even than 16 and 8, because instead of being restricted to certain periods of time every single day, they have 2 days for which they're just eating a 5 or 600 calorie meal, and the rest of the week they're eating, regular meals. Because realistically speaking, in order for you to just maintain your weight, your body has a certain number of calories that it burns. And as long as you are not going over that amount of calories, you won't gain weight. with the idea of 5 and 2 is you're taking 2 of those 7 days of the week and you're drastically reducing it so that you are automatically in a calorie deficit by having 2 days of the week for which you are restricting your consumption to 500 or 600 calories. So sometimes that can be easier for some people, doing the 5 and 2 first, and then graduating up to 16 and 8, and then potentially doing the eat, stop, eat, which is the 24-hour fasting period once or twice a week. Okay. So tips for getting started on intermittent fasting. So the first thing I would think of that I would suggest is you pick your fasting plan. And you really want to pick your fasting plan based off of kind of where you are in your eating process. And then even a precursor step to this, it would really be to identify what your eating and dietary strategy is going to be. And again, I would suggest you choose a diet that is sustainable, that is healthy, that is well balanced, that doesn't completely cut out one macronutrient group. And by macronutrient groups, I mean proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. Those are the three major macronutrient groups that your body really operates off of. So I would suggest not cutting out completely any one, but you can tweak the amount that you consume. I mentioned before the Mediterranean diet. That might be a good diet for you to look up and see if it works for you. It is a very well-balanced diet, and it is something that can be adjusted for anyone who is, whether you're a meat eater or whether you're a vegetarian or whatever the case might be. So I decide on your diet and then pick your fasting plan, whether it's going to be 16 and 8, 5 and 2, or if you're going to try the eat, stop, eat. And again, that one would be one that I would suggest you don't start right out of the gate with. And then once you've picked your fasting plan, then prep for your fasting period. The goal is to set yourself up for success when it comes to fasting, okay? So get your water and other fasting friendly drinks based off of the fast that you've chosen. Stay hydrated and, pick an activity. Sometimes to help take your mind off of fasting, activity can be helpful. Now, I'm not suggesting you do any rigorous activity if you've never done any type of fasting before, but a light walk would be nice. Visit a museum, something that will take your mind off it, but off of fasting, but not something that will be too rigorous and will exhaust you out. And then the last thing is prep for your eating window. That's probably more important than anything else. Because when you come off of your fast, you really don't want to gorge on food. What will be a good idea, rule of thumb to do is 30 minutes before you are going to be breaking your fast. You'll probably want something like a bone broth. If you are vegan or vegetarian, you can do a vegetarian broth. That really starts to get your digestive system prepared for food and actually processing food. And then when you actually break fast, don't eat anything that is complex and hard for your body to process. Something very soft and easy to process, like a smoothie or eggs or yogurt. Those would be good things to break your fast with. And then, once you get into an hour into your eating window, then you can eat like you normally do. And I think if you consistently do that, you'll create a pattern. This will become normal for you and you will start to see results. Okay. Well, what if you don't see results? And what if your scale is just not moving? Well, it's time to do two things if that's happening. Number one, you want to put things into perspective. And then number two, you want to evaluate your routine. Oftentimes, we start something, we try it, it doesn't work. We automatically assume that it is the actual diet or the thing that we're trying out that doesn't work in that our particular process, or things that we're kind of not paying attention to that can be having very small things that can have a very big impact on our results. So the first thing I would say is put things in a perspective. When it comes to intermittent fasting, you will not always necessarily just drop a bunch of pounds where you can see the results of that on the scale. A lot of times what happens is you lose inches. So that means you may lose inches off of your weight, off of your waist, off of your arm, off of your legs, off of all different parts of your body. Some people lose them in one particular area more quickly than others. A lot of times that waistline, the inches coming off of there is a little bit more stubborn than some of the other areas, but not for everyone. So put that into perspective because there are a lot of things that can change and cause fluctuations in your weight. Water weight gain, if you are actually working out, sometimes water going into your muscles, causing muscle swelling, which is kind of what a lot of people want. They want their muscles to look nice and toned, but that can add more density in weight. And so when you get on the scale, even though you may not necessarily feel like you've gained weight, you actually may feel slimmer. The scale may say something different. And so that can be a bit confusing. And quite frankly, it can be frustrating for many. So put that into perspective. Don't weigh too heavily on the scale. And then the expectations that you're setting on yourself can also be a bit too oppressive. If you say to yourself, I need to lose 5 pounds in 1 week, that may be a bit unrealistic. And the stress of it can really have an impact on how successful you are and how focused you are on doing your intermittent fasting. But the other thing is you may want to evaluate your routine. So let's take a look at several ways in which many people may be causing a bottleneck for themselves when it comes to their weight loss. So you're not in a calorie deficit. So the problem is when you are fasting, you're not eating and you're like, great, I'm burning all these calories. And then when it comes time for you to eat, a lot of people will gorge. And that actually will not help you. You're just shifting the overconsumption of food to a very small period of time. So you want to make sure that you are considerate of the food that you're eating, the amount of food that you're going to be eating during your eating window. So that could be a challenge for you. You're just simply eating too much food during your eating window. You aren't aware of your intake. So this kind of plays into the previous bullet of you're not in a calorie deficit, because a lot of times people don't realize they're not in a calorie deficit because they are consistently eating more food than they really should be. And so to make yourself aware of it, how to solve that issue is to use a food app where you're tracking it. Now, I know that I said that intermittent fasting doesn't require you to track your food or points or calories or anything like that, but this may be something you might want to consider if you're not losing weight, and if you are overeating during your eating window. And it doesn't have to be an overwhelming process. You could choose very simple foods right in the beginning, just till you get acclimated to your intermittent fasting. It'll make it easier for you to track. The other thing is your fasting window is too short. And what I mean specifically by that, you are expecting results too soon within your intermittent fasting journey. The best way to solve that is to stay consistent with your intermittent fasting routine for at least a month or two. And then if you haven't seen any weight loss then you can scratch that off at the list as being an issue, that you're not waiting long enough to see results. The other thing is, and this plays into the previous bullet, you haven't been consistent. You've got to choose an intermittent fasting plan that is feasible for you to stick to and for you to do consistently. So otherwise, you'll be yo-yoing and off and on and losing weight, not losing weight. That could be a problem for you. The other thing is you're not moving. I know that, with intermittent fasting, you really don't want to do rigorous working out during the heart of your fast, or if you've not done fasting before. But a small walk and, incorporated during your fasting window, it won't be hurtful, especially if it's a light, enjoyable walk. That is a good way to do it. Or if you want something more intense, do your intense exercise at the end of your fasting window. That way, when you finish your intense exercise, it's time for you to fuel back up. So it is positioned at a time where it is time for you to eat. So this allows you to have food in your system and allows you the necessary nutrients that you need in order to recover from your workout. Okay. A lot of athletes use that particular strategy, is fasting and then working out at the very tail end of their their fasting window. And then by the time they finish working out, it is time for them to refuel, and it falls during their eating window. So good strategy to take. You aren't focusing on lifestyle. And so what I mean by lifestyle is that intermittent fasting and eating alone aren't the only factors that are important on your weight loss journey. And not eating, strictly not eating during a period of time, and then eating during your eating window aren't the only factors that will affect your success. Rest is very important. Rest is extremely important with how you respond during your non-eating period. It also is important with, the way you metabolize when you are awake and the way that you're burning fat during your fasting period. So that's going to be extremely important. It does help with relieving stress when you get rest. And you can do things. Rest doesn't necessarily have to just be sleep, but you can do yoga, meditation, deep breathing. Those types of things can also help as well. And then lastly, you're eating whatever you want during your fasting window. Okay, so true enough, you can have a lot of flexibility with fasting, but eating pizza and burgers and chips and all of that in excess during your eating window, that's not going to work. It will cause a whole host of other issues as well as mitigate other health circumstances like cholesterol or diabetes, etc. And I just want to make sure you all know that the goal of intermittent fasting is to help improve your health. Obviously, weight is one thing, and it is part of what affects your health. But you want to make sure that you are consuming foods that are going to fuel you. So you don't want to be eating a lot of highly processed foods with lots of sugar, lots of saturated fats and greases. That's really going to defeat a lot of the purpose of you doing the intermittent fasting. And then not only that, is that it may not give you the nutrients you need in order to feel like you've been fueled by the food you're consuming. And then lastly, you're missing out on protein. This is what I was referring to is don't remove one of the major macronutrients out of your diet. Your body really needs them all. And protein is actually a big one. In fact, protein is what helps you keep the definition in your muscles. It is also a really good thing to help with moderating your hunger because it takes your body a lot longer to process protein, and it gives you exactly what you need in order to really stay satiated. It helps you from snacking. It can help you with ensuring that you feel like you have gotten the nutrients that you need out of your food. And protein for everyone is going to be a little bit different based off of your weight in terms of the amount. But just in general, if you have at least 30 grams of protein per meal, you should be good. Most Americans do not consume enough protein, and women consume it in even less volumes than we should. So as we get older, we really do need to make sure that we are maintaining our protein intake so that we can maintain muscle mass. And that's important, especially if you are intermittent fasting, because you don't want to lose muscle mass because you're not consuming enough protein. You don't want your body to go into a mode of, not having had enough fuel in it and it burn off, the muscle that you need. So that's an important factor to consume, important piece to consume, which is the protein. Resources you can use. So I've got a variety of different links here from several different places with information on the basics on intermittent fasting. But at the end, I decided to include some information from Vita Health, which is available to all CISC members that are not enrolled in Kaiser Permanente. And that actually really provides some consultation for those who are looking for some assistance with weight loss. So click on the link and check out and see how you can get use out of Vita Health to help you with your weight loss goals. And then Kaiser Permanente has the Healthy Balance Program, where it is a program where you have meetings to help you with your weight loss journey, as well as you have a a wellness coach who contacts you to help you meet your wellness journeys. So those are some resources that will be available for you. I will provide them and the downloadable resources from this workshop. And hopefully you were able to get some really good information out of today's workshop and you are ready to start your journey with intermittent fasting. Alrighty, so that concludes today's session. And were there any questions that anyone had? No? All right. Well, if there are no more questions, I will conclude today's session and I will make sure that the recording is available for playback as well as the resources that were included in the links in today's presentation. Thank you all so much, and you have a great rest of your day.